The man was dying right there in the emergency room waiting area, slumped in his chair, gasping for air, face turning gray. The nurses at the front desk, buried in paperwork, too overwhelmed to notice. But he noticed. The janitor, the guy mopping floors in the corner that nobody pays attention to. What he did next saved that man's life. But instead of gratitude, instead of recognition, they tried to pretend it never happened. They wanted the story buried. Until the truth got out. And when it did, everything changed. His name is Darnell. And for over 10 years, he'd been a night janitor at a mid-sized hospital in Tennessee. Every shift looked the same. Push the cart down long corridors. Polish floors until they gleamed under fluorescent lights. Empty trash bins. Wipe down surfaces. Keep everything clean and safe. Most people barely noticed him. To doctors rushing between patients, to nurses changing shifts, to families waiting for news about their loved ones. Darnell was just part of the background. Invisible. But here's what they didn't know. Darnell noticed everything. A decade of night shifts meant he'd overheard thousands of conversations. Doctors discussing symptoms. Nurses going over emergency protocols. Residents practicing procedures. He absorbed it all like a sponge. He had no formal medical training. No degree hanging on a wall. No credentials. But he had something else. A sharp eye, an attentive mind, and years of observation that taught him the rhythm of a hospital. When things were running smoothly. When something fell off. When normal became dangerous. Darnell loved his job. Took pride in it. Never asked for recognition or thanks. He just showed up, did his work, and went home. Simple life. Steady work. Honest pay. He never imagined one night would change everything. Before we go any further, have you ever been the person doing essential work that nobody notices? The one keeping things running while everyone else gets the credit? Drop a comment if that's you. Because Darnell's story might just change how you see yourself and your value. It started like any other Tuesday night shift. The ER had its usual buzz, a controlled chaos of beeping monitors, rolling gurneys, doctors calling out orders, families clustered in corners waiting for updates. Busy but manageable. Darnell was mopping near the waiting area, moving methodically, muscle memory guiding his hands. That's when he noticed a man, middle-aged, maybe early 50s, sitting alone near the water fountain. He was clutching his chest, leaning forward slightly. At first, it looked like typical discomfort, maybe indigestion, maybe anxiety. The ER sees that kind of thing all the time. But something in Darnell's gut said, keep watching. The man's breathing changed. Shallow, labored, like he couldn't quite get enough air. Then his face started losing color. Not just pale, grayish, waxy. Darnell glanced toward the nurse's station. 3 nurses, all buried in paperwork. The hospital's computer system had been glitching all night, creating a backlog of admissions. They were drowning in data entry. Trying to catch up, the man had been triaged earlier. His chart noted chest pain, non-urgent. So he was waiting, in line behind other cases that seemed more pressing. Darnell kept mopping, but his eyes never left the man. The man slumped lower in his seat. His hand slipped from his chest to his lap. His eyes started to glaze over, that distant, unfocused stare that Darnell had seen before. The look that meant someone was slipping away. Every instinct in Darnell's body screamed, this is bad. This is really bad. His heart started pounding. His grip tightened on the mop handle. The man tipped sideways, about to slide out of the chair entirely. And that's when Darnell made a choice that would change 2 lives forever. Time seemed to slow down. Darnell stood there for one frozen second, his mind racing through 1,000 thoughts at once. I'm just a janitor. This isn't my job. What if I'm wrong? What if I cause a scene and he's fine? But the man's lips were turning blue. Protocol was clear. Alert medical staff. Don't intervene directly. Let the professionals handle it. But protocol assumed the professionals were looking. And they weren't. They couldn't see what he saw. The man's body went limp. He was seconds from hitting the floor. Darnell dropped his mop. It clattered against the tile. He ran. Help! I need help here. His voice cut through the ambient noise of the ER, like a siren. He reached the man just as he started to fall, catching him, easing him down the ground as gently as he could manage. Darnell's training came from years of listening, watching, absorbing. Now it all flooded back. Tilt the head back. Check the airway. Make sure nothing's blocking it. He placed 2 fingers against the man's neck, searching for a pulse. Nothing, or maybe the faintest flutter. He couldn't tell. The man wasn't breathing right. His chest barely moved. Cardiac arrest. The words echoed in Darnell's mind from countless late-night conversations he'd overheard. He positioned his hands in the center of the man's chest, one over the other, arms locked straight, and he started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Somebody please. He's not breathing. 5, 6, 7, 8. His arms burned. His voice went hoarse from shouting. People were staring now, but nobody was moving fast enough. 10, 11, 12. Come on, come on, come on. And then, finally, a young resident in blue scrubs heard him and sprinted across the ER. Pause right here for just a second. Could you do what Darnell just did? Risk being wrong in front of everyone? Risk overstepping when you're not supposed to? Hit that like button if you think you'd have the courage. Because most people freeze in moments like this. But not Darnell. The young resident dropped to his knees beside Darnell, his eyes scanning the patient quickly. He checked for a pulse, looked at the man's face. His eyes went wide with awe. Suddenly, the entire ER mobilized. Nurses came running. Equipment wheeled in from every direction. The attending physician appeared, barking orders. Start in 4-line. Give me AP. Charge to 200. Darnell backed away, hands still shaking, watching the organized chaos unfold. The medical team swarmed the patient. Defibrillator paddles ready. Clear. The man's body jolted violently from the electrical shock. Once. Nothing. Again. Charge to 300. Clear. The second shock. Still nothing. Darnell's heart sank. Had he been too late? Had he done something wrong? One more time. Clear. The third shock. And then a beep. Faint at first, then stronger. The heart monitor showed a rhythm. Irregular, but there. The man gasped, his chest heaving suddenly, his eyes fluttering open in confusion. We got him. He's back. The team worked quickly to stabilize him. For fluids running. Oxygen mask secured. Within minutes. They had him on a gurney. Rushing H, the waiting area fell silent again, like the storm had passed through and left everything still. Darnell stood there, his mop and cart abandoned several feet away, trying to process what had just happened. The young resident approached him, out of breath, face flushed, him toward the ICU. Ecognition. He's in cardiac arrest. Get the crash cart now. You save his life, he said quietly. If you hadn't started compressions when you did... He trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. Darnell just nodded, his throat too tight to speak. But as his shift continued and the adrenaline faded, Darnell started to notice something strange. The uncomfortable glances from senior staff. The whispered conversations that stopped when he walked by. Not anger, exactly, but not gratitude either. Something else. Something that made his stomach twist. One nurse muttered to another near the break room. Can you believe a janitor was doing chest compressions? Another response, quieter. What if he'd been wrong? What if a family sued? Later that night, when a local news outlet called asking about the cardiac arrest save, the attending physician's statement was carefully worded. Our emergency team responded appropriately and successfully revived the patient. No mention of Darnell. No acknowledgement of who saw it first, who acted first, who bought them the time they needed. It was like he hadn't been there at all. Days passed. Darnell returned to his regular night shifts, mopping floors, emptying trash, polishing surfaces, back to being invisible. But something had shifted inside him. He couldn't stop replaying that night in his mind. He had saved a man's life. He knew he had. The young resident confirmed it. Yet no one from hospital administration reached out. No thank you. No acknowledgement. Nothing. He overheard more conversations in the break room during shift changes. Some staff members seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the whole situation, not because Darnell had done something wrong, but because he'd done something right. It sets a weird precedent, one doctor said. We can't have non-medical staff making clinical decisions. What if next time someone without training tries to help and makes it worse? Liability nightmare. Darnell never asked for praise. That wasn't who he was. He'd never been the type to seek the spotlight, but the silence felt deliberate, strategic, like they were hoping the story would just disappear. His supervisor, a nice enough guy named Marcus, pulled him aside one afternoon. "Look, Darnell," Marcus said, shifting his weight uncomfortably. "You did a good thing. A really good thing. But maybe next time, just call for help and step back, okay? Let the medical staff handle it." The unspoken message was clear. Stay in your lane. Darnell nodded. Didn't argue, but something in his chest tightened, a knot of frustration and hurt he didn't quite know how to untangle. He thought about quitting, walking away from a decade of work, finding something else. But this job was all he had. Steady income, health benefits. At his age, starting over wasn't simple. So he kept his head down, kept mopping, kept cleaning, and tried to ignore the bitter taste the whole thing left in his mouth. Meanwhile, outside the hospital walls, a different story was unfolding, one that would change everything. The man Darnell saved had a name, Robert Thompson, 52 years old, owner of a small but successful construction company, married to his high school sweetheart, Linda, father to 3 kids, 2 in college, 1 still in high school. After he was discharged a week later, still weak but alive, his wife Linda asked the doctors a simple question. "How did you know so fast that he was in cardiac arrest?" "He was just sitting in the waiting room." One of the nurses, a younger woman who'd been there that night, hesitated. Then she told Linda the truth. "It wasn't us, ma'am. It was one of our janitors. He saw your husband collapsing, started CPR before we even realized what was happening. He saved your husband's life." Linda Thompson stood in that hospital corridor, tears streaming down her face, and asked for the janitor's name. She found Darnell 2 nights later during his shift, walking down a quiet hallway pushing his cart. "Excuse me, are you Darnell?" He turned, surprised to see this woman and 3 younger people, her kids, standing there with flowers and a handmade card. They surrounded him, hugging him, crying, thanking him over and over. "You gave us more time with him," Linda sobbed. "You gave our kids their father. You gave me my husband back." Darnell, overwhelmed and embarrassed, tried to downplay it. "I just did what anyone would do, ma'am." "No," she said firmly. "You did what no one else did. You paid attention when everyone else was too busy." Linda Thompson wasn't the type to let something like this go. That weekend, she posted about it on Facebook, named the hospital, told the whole story. "This man saved my husband's life, and the hospital won't even acknowledge him. Robert would be dead if not for Darnell, but they act like he doesn't exist." The post went viral locally. 10,000 shares in 2 days. Local news stations picked it up. Janitor saves life, hospital stays silent. Community leaders got involved. Pastors, city council members, patient advocacy groups. People started showing up at the hospital, demanding answers. Why isn't Darnell being recognized? Why are you erasing his heroism? What message does this send about how you value your workers? The hospital administration, suddenly facing mounting public pressure and bad press, finally released a statement. "We are grateful for all staff members who contribute to patient safety and well-being. We value every member of our hospital family." Generic corporate language. Hollow, but it was something. Then came the real turning point. Robert Thompson himself, still recovering and moving slowly, held a press conference outside the hospital. Local media showed up, cameras rolling, microphones extended. Robert, looking thinner and tired but alive, told his story. "I was sitting in that waiting room, and I felt like I was drowning, like my chest was being crushed. I remember thinking, this is it. I'm going to die here. His voice cracked, and then I heard someone shouting for help. I felt hands on me, lowering me down. I felt someone doing compressions on my chest. Hard, rhythmic, keeping me alive. He looked directly into the camera. That someone wasn't a doctor, wasn't a nurse. It was Darnell, the janitor, and I wouldn't be standing here without him. He paused for effect. Heroes don't always wear white coats. Has someone ever downplayed your contribution, taken credit for your work, made you feel invisible? Let us know in the comments. Because Darnell's story is about more than one night. It's about respect, recognition, and valuing people for their humanity, not their title. The hospital could no longer ignore the pressure. 2 weeks after Robert's press conference, they held an official recognition ceremony in the hospital's main conference room. Local press invited. Community members filled the seats. Hospital administration in their best suits. They presented Darnell with a Community Hero Award, a plaque with his name engraved, along with a commendation for extraordinary courage and quick thinking. The CEO shook his hand for the cameras, praising his invaluable contribution to patient care. The medical director spoke about how every member of our team plays a vital role. Cameras flashed. Applause filled the room. Darnell stood there in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit, awkward under the attention, but gracious. He thanked everyone. Said he was just glad Robert was okay. Said he was honored to work at the hospital. But inside, part of him couldn't shake the feeling that this was performative. Damage control. Where was this recognition 2 weeks ago? Why did it take a viral post and a press conference to make them acknowledge what happened? Still, he accepted it with dignity, because that's who Darnell was. Robert Thompson was there too, standing in the front row with Linda and his kids. When the ceremony ended, he made his way to Darnell and pulled him into a long hug. "Don't let them forget what you did," he whispered. The young resident who'd helped that night approached Darnell afterward. "I'm sorry it took this long," he said quietly. "You deserve better. From all of us." Darnell appreciated the honesty, nodded his thanks. The hospital also announced a policy change. They were implementing emergency response training for all staff, not just medical personnel. Basic CPR, how to recognize signs of cardiac arrest, stroke, respiratory distress. Janitors, cafeteria workers, security guards, everyone would be trained. It was a small change, but a meaningful one. Darnell went back to his night shifts after that. Same job, same cart, same floors. But people saw him differently now. Nurses smiled when he passed. Doctors nodded in respect. Patients' families who'd heard his story stopped to thank him. And Darnell? He just kept doing what he'd always done. Paying attention, being present, caring. Darnell's story didn't stay in Tennessee. It spread across social media, got picked up by national news outlets, became a symbol of something bigger than one night in one hospital. It became about the people we overlook, the voices we dismiss, the value we assign based on titles instead of humanity. How often do we assume expertise only comes with degrees and credentials? How many times do we walk past someone and fail to see their worth because of what they do for a living? Darnell had no medical degree, no formal training, no certification hanging on a wall. But he had something else, something that can't be taught in a classroom. Years of careful observation, a sharp, attentive mind, and most importantly, the courage to act when everyone else froze. Robert Thompson made a full recovery, went back to work, back to his family, back to the life that Darnell gave him back. He and Darnell stayed in touch. Birthday cards, holiday visits. Their families became friends. Linda Thompson tells everyone who'll listen. An angel showed up that night, wearing scrubs and pushing a janitor's cart. Here's the uncomfortable truth that no one at the hospital wanted to say out loud. If Darnell had been a doctor who noticed a cardiac arrest, he would have been called a hero immediately. No hesitation, no awkwardness, just celebration. But because he was a janitor, they questioned him, worried about liability, tried to erase his contribution. It took public pressure, a community that refused to let the truth be buried, to force the recognition he deserved. And it took Robert Thompson, a man who refused to let his savior be forgotten. The lesson in all of this? Life-saving wisdom isn't about your job title. It's not about letters after your name or the color of your coat. It's about awareness, humanity, and the willingness to act when action is needed. Darnell didn't need a medical degree to see a man dying. He just needed to care enough to do something about it. And that's something any of us can do. So here's where we land. Heroes don't always wear white coats. Sometimes they push mop carts down hospital corridors at 2 a.m. Sometimes they're the people we walk past without seeing, the ones doing essential work that keeps everything running while others get the credit. Darnell didn't save Robert Thompson because he had medical training. He saved him because he paid attention, because he cared, because when the moment came to act, he didn't hesitate. And honestly, that's something every single one of us is capable of. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who feels invisible in their own job, someone who wonders if what they do matters. Drop a comment below. Tell us about a time you or someone you know stepped up when it mattered. We read every single comment, and your stories inspire us to keep telling these real, powerful stories. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories about courage, humanity, and the heroes hiding in plain sight, the people the world overlooks, but who change everything. Thanks for watching. And remember this, you don't need a title to make a difference. You don't need credentials to save a life. You just need to care enough to act when the moment comes. See you in the next one.